Let me go to my guests. I am joined with the man himself, KJ No, a favorite of mine and a favorite of my audience. KJ is a journalist, political analyst, writer, and teacher specializing in the geopolitics of the Asia Pacific region. He was contributor to the book Capitalism on a Ventilator. It was censored by Amazon, but you can get it at iacenter.org. KJ is also on the China Report on Breakthrough News Network, a fantastic outlet with a fantastic host. How you doing, KJ? You doing okay this morning?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
I am doing fine. I am taking issue with some of the media reporting coming out of the United States, but otherwise, no issue. And I guess that's kind of normal. That's why I have a job in the first place, right? I just think some of their reporting is farcical. So two things, and I guess the first thing. Oh, by the way, one more thing for the audience, and you can laugh at this too, KJ. The same guy who I was just showing Kellogg, who was like, "Oh, that's a hell of an escalation." This is Yermak in Washington, because Yermak is coming for more weapons, sanctions, money, and all this other stuff. And here is Kellogg, who called it unfortunate, but Ukraine was the wing, hugging that same Yermak. Just great. Just great. KJ, let's start with South Korea. South Korea has a new president. South Korea has a new president. Now, what do we know about this new president? I can imagine that Yoon Suk Yeol, he stunk up the office to the point where the opposition most likely won. From my understanding, he's moderate on some level, so the expectation is that he's not a puppet of the U.S. in a way that the previous president was. I think I have a picture of him already up, so right here. It's this gentleman who won the presidential election. And I would like you to give us a little bit of details. The name is Lee Jae-myung. Is that right?
Correct.
I
Yes.
nailed the name. Excellent. Okay. But this is the gentleman. What do we know about him so far?
So Lee Jae-myung is he is the leader of the Democratic Solidarity Party. They call themselves the DP, but they're the opposition party. They're the ones who impeached Yoon Suk-yeol and then eventually got him, out of office. They are a center-left party, and Lee represents a kind of populist wing of the DP. So a little bit of his personal background, which I shared before, but he originally grew up dirt poor, just so poor. His parents were cleaning toilets.
I'm sorry to interrupt. That's the guy you were talking about. Okay,
Yeah.
I remember you explaining this. Please continue. I'm sorry. Okay, I remember.
So he, just absolutely dirt poor in one of the poorest countries in the world. After he graduated from grade school, he went and started working in a sweatshop because his family was so poor that they, couldn't put food on the table. His sister and his mother, cleaned toilets for a living. And at the age of 12, he went and started working in a sweatshop, making plastic items and then later baseballs. So, if you have a baseball from that era, it, may have somehow touched his hands. But, if you're 12 years old and you go into a sweatshop, that's like being sold into a brothel, into a whorehouse at that age. You never come back from that because it is such a debilitating and destructive profession to get into. By the time you're 18, you will not have any fingerprints because chemicals have burned off every trace of your ridges. So when you go in to get your ID, you cannot even fingerprint yourself properly. And by the age of 40, 45, you'll be dead from cancer, from all the chemicals. So he started working in a sweatshop, and he was injured twice. His left arm was pulled into machinery, and it was crushed. So he's also disabled. But despite this background, working in a sweatshop, he somehow managed to get himself into a night school. So he's, you're working a 12-hour day, a 12 to 16-hour day, and then you go to a night school for 2 to 3 hours and you try and get some additional education. And through this process, he was able to pass the middle school equivalency exam and then the high school equivalency exam. So working in a factory, he was able to, graduate from high school by passing equivalency exams. And then he won a Fulbright scholarship to law school in Korea. In Korea, like in many countries, law school is an undergraduate. So he graduated as a lawyer, got a Fulbright, and then he took the bar exam, aced it on the first try, and then he became a labor and human rights lawyer. And then from that, and, already there, he is a 1 in a million. People who start working in factories do not become lawyers. That's just unthinkable. They don't, their academic life, the intellectual life is dead. But anyway, he got into law school, became a human rights lawyer. And then he started working himself up the ranks, and he became the mayor of Seongnam City, which is like a major city just outside of Seoul. It's a very important city, like New Jersey to New York or something like that. And there he instituted a lot of populist policies. And then he ran for governor of the city, the province surrounding Seoul. So it would be like becoming the governor of California. And eventually he was elected there. So he's come up the political ladder, he's paid his dues, gone through all kinds of hardship, ran for Yoon Suk-yeol in the previous election, lost by 0.7%, which is just a fractional margin, the tightest margin in the history of Korean elections. And this time he ran again, and he trounced his opponent by about 9 percentage points. So clearly a landslide. But this, at the core is a very, very strong rebuke to Yoon and the martial law that he was trying to impose, and everybody around him who wanted this kind of dictatorial structure. So it's a big sea change, and people are jubilant. They're out in the streets dancing, but we're not out of the woods yet, because this is a very, very important high stakes election, because it affects the US geostrategically. So you can be sure that the daggers are still out. You can be sure that there'll be further disruptions, further twists and turns. Yoon was Washington's perfect partner. Jae-myung has said, very directly that he's going to balance with China, and that he's going to look out for South Korea's interests, not for the US's.
I'm sorry, I was pulling up the thing. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Talk about an overreach. God, talk about an overreach. Like because I think the audience needs to understand a larger context for this. The United States comes out screaming that North Korea is involved in the war. Okay, well, North Korea ultimately was, but North Korea was on Russian territory involved in the war, meaning the security agreement that they had with North Korea allowed them to help on Russian territory, but they never invaded Ukraine. They were always on Russian territory. So the US is screaming this at the top of their lungs. They have a patsy in South Korea who decides around the exact same time, I'm declaring martial law. And not just declaring martial law, I'm going to effectively kill my political opposition. And I'm going to somehow blame the North Koreans as if they're the ones that were responsible for doing this. And I'm going to say they're Chinese spies, they're North Korean spies, they're spies everywhere. And so I must do this, a plan that they had planned out for months on end. And there's a question about whether or not he did this because they didn't trust, let's say, the parliamentary opposition to the US will, and they wanted more troops to be able to help Ukraine in the war, which if you can make the argument that North Korea is involved in the war, maybe you can get South Korean troops into the war also. In which case, as you pointed out, the US takes control of the South Korean military in cases like this where the military gets involved. Now, the South Korean people, thankfully, flipped out over this and fought tooth and nail with their own lives, by the way, at risk to protect the democracy of South Korea. He has stunk up their office to such a degree that the opposition ends up winning. And this guy who is a 1 in a billion a political figure and success story, ends up taking power in South Korea. That's astonishing. First, is there anything I said that's wrong? There's that. But
Uh,
two,
mhm.
that is an amazing arc that the US has effectively overshot its load.
I think you're absolutely right. The U.S. has overshot its load. It's brought about exactly the opposite that it wanted.
Yeah.
Remember, when Yoon was elected, they were so jubilant and so happy in Washington. It was Christmas in Washington. He was a walking wish fulfillment list, and
Yeah.
he was walking wish fulfillment list. Rand called him the U.S.'s perfect partner, and they called him the perfect partner, and Rand doesn't use that type of language very often, but
Right.
called him the perfect partner because he was the perfect partner for war. Because he said that anything the US wanted as far as waging war on China was concerned, he would do. He would make an alliance with Japan. Japan is Korea's former colonizer. He said, "Oh, no problem. We'll embrace our former colonizer. We'll get into bed with our rapist," right? I mean, that's what he said. And then he also, escalated in every way possible. 250 days of military exercising meaning rehearsals for war in on the Korean territory every year, and including 20 strategic nuclear bombing exercises. And then he was joining every U.S. alliance possible. He said that he was willing to be part of AUKUS and NATO, and they set up a NATO liaison office. Everything. So he really was this walking wish fulfillment list. And leading up to the martial law declaration, he was actually trying to provoke a war with North Korea. That is to say, he sent drones towards Pyongyang, and we know how dangerous that is. And we saw, what happened recently in Russia, but they were sending drones into North Korea. They fired 900 missiles into a contested territory that North Korea considers its own. They were setting up a false flag attack, claiming that, when South Korean legislators were killed, that this was the work of North Korean agents. And they, appropriated 170,000 North Korean uniforms made to look, perfectly realistic in order to, create that lie. And yes, I believe that he was ready to provoke war with North Korea and use that as casus belli, in which case the war against Russia would have been a horizontal escalation, because North Korea is an alliance partner with Russia. They have a mutual defense treaty. So if South Korea goes to war against North Korea has a border with Russia along, its northeastern tip, and therefore Russia, it would have been a kind of horizontal escalation for Russia, as well as the possibility of sending South Korean troops who were trained in cold weather warfare, trench warfare, joint arms warfare, NATO interoperable. It would have sent those troops possibly into Ukraine as well, because we know that the manpower issue is on the Ukraine side, not on the Russian side. Now, the thing about North Koreans fighting in Ukraine, that was a lie. They were fighting in Kursk,
In Kursk, right.
in Russian territory.
Right.
And everything that they said at the time about North Koreans was wrong, except for the fact that they were fighting. We don't know how many, they were not impoverished, starved people, soldiers who had been sent there without knowing where they were going, and they were, running into the battlefield, naked, like human waves, I mean, this is just absolute mythology, absolute lies, right? So 99% of what was said about North Korea was a lie. But inside there was a small kernel of truth, was that the North
Yeah.
Koreans were observing and learning from the battlefield. They joined the battlefield on their initiative, not on Russia's request, and they were trying to learn some of the modern tactics that were happening. And then apparently at some point later along the line, they were actually engaged in direct combat. And these were not, impoverished schoolboys who were stunted and eating dog meat in cans, etc. All of that ridiculous stuff. These were highly trained special forces. North Korea sent some of its best, and they sent them to get some direct combat observation and experience.
That stuff's so racist. Running into the battlefield naked. It's like, get out of here. The Russians are fighting with shovels. Their morale is so low. The North Koreans are being forced, and they're eating dog meat and sent out there with no proper uniforms. Like, the stuff that they say is so just rabidly racist.
It's so
yeah. No, please.
No, I mean it's so over the top. And so when you hear that kind of stuff, because it's so packaged in lies and exaggerations that it's hard to get to the truth. And there was a tiny kernel of truth, was that they were there, but everything else around them was complete and total fabrication.
Is there a chance for rapprochement with North Korea with this president, or that is off the table in general? Like that's politically impossible in the current political situation?
Most of the left progressive parties in Korea, including the DP, are actually favorable towards, at the very least, de-escalation with North Korea.
Okay.
And some of them are open to rapprochement and even eventual, the long-term hope is reunification. So I would put Lee Jae-myung in that category. Certainly he's warm towards North Korea. One of the charges against him that, of course, they were using endless warfare because they wanted to knock him out because he was their major contender. They raided his house 300 times, like SWAT raided his house. Yeah, no, I'm not kidding you. They SWAT raided his house 300 times, turned it upside down because they wanted to find something on him. So, he was living through that hell for years. And one of the charges, all the charges were ridiculous. They said he lied during campaigning. Like if you did that, every politician, in the West would have to be arrested because, that's just the nature. But anyway, they said something that he said, and then they interpreted and reinterpreted. And then they said it is possible to construe this as misleading because somebody might misunderstand it. Therefore, he lied. Therefore, we have to put him into prison and keep him from running. So this was the kind of stuff they were trying to throw at him. But one of the charges was that he had, sent gifts to North Korea. By the way, through like an underwear company, that there was an underwear company that had, been used to send money indirectly.
The American people are.
I'm sorry. No, I'm listening. It's just outrageous. It's shocking to me. 300 times, yes. And there was no outrage in South Korea over that.
Well, there was.
And by the way, I was listening to you. I was pulling up a video, so I was listening. I wasn't. I heard everything you said. It's amazing to me that there wasn't. Oh, you said there was outrage over here.
There was outrage, but they couldn't do anything about it because Yoon Suk-yeol, the former president, the impeached president, was the prosecutor. He was the he was like the attorney general of South Korea, and so he had an entire army of prosecutors behind him. And he said when he was initially campaigning, several years ago, he said that he would turn the country into a country of prosecutors, which he did. So he's prosecuting all his enemies, including Lee Jae-myung, including, the top leaders of the opposition party, some of who are in prison right now, and also, prosecuting trade unionists and anybody who was involved in peace work or, trying to get, Korea to de-escalate against North Korea. All of them were prosecuted.
One last question on this. Are they going to take Yoon Suk-yeol's head?
Are they going to take his head? You mean he's what's going
Will
to
he
happen?
be executed for what he was going to do? He should be executed.
He,
And that is a hard ass perspective, but to be very clear, the notion that you're going to try to A, start a war, so you're going to get a lot of your people killed. B, you're going to go after your political opposition, have them killed or disappeared in order as a provocation. Like all of these things are so beyond the pale, with a large death toll associated with it, even killing his own people to do it. That seems outrageous to me. How's the death penalty not on the table?
it could be on the table right now. He is in court. He's in court standing trial for insurrection. So he's already been impeached. He no longer has presidential immunity. He's no longer the president. Jae-myung is the new president, and he's starting yesterday.
Mhm.
But he's standing. Yoon Suk-yeol is standing trial for insurrection. That is to say, treason. And the penalty for insurrection is life imprisonment or the death penalty. So technically, it's possible that he could be executed. But I think realistically, first, it remains to be seen whether he will be found guilty. Yes, because it looks like the judge is trying to throw the court case. One of the first bad signals was first he was released from custody, which is not something you do when you have somebody that is that dangerous. You know, he had pretrial detention, but he was released from pretrial detention. And then the second piece is that they are not allowing any cameras into the courtroom, which,
This is
given
not good.
yeah, it's not good because given the magnitude of the charges and the importance of the historical and political process involved, you want to have witnesses to it. But he has banned all cameras from the courtroom, and so I feel that there's some very very untoward things happening inside the judicial process. Other people have also pointed this out, but we'll see. At least he's standing trial. At least he's no longer president. Will he be convicted? That remains to be seen. I think the case is an open and shut case. I mean, essentially, you only have to answer two questions. Did he declare martial law? Yes, he did. He's on television declaring martial law. Did he do it under, using military force? Yes, he did. Was he justified in military force, and was he justified in declaring martial law? A child could tell you no, but there's a lot of, as for lack of a better word, there's a lot of kind of deep state maneuvering around him, and you can see that there's a lot of kind of erasure and cover up happening right now.
I will tell you this. If George Bush had been tried, convicted, and executed, the behavior of the presidents that came after him would be different. And it is vitally important that this takes place, just to show the president is not a king. The president can't declare martial law willy-nilly in order to take the country to war. Like there are rational reasons for doing this. It's like, somebody kills somebody. Okay, well, what is the reason that you prosecute the person for murder? A, we don't want this to be normalized in a society. And B, you need to do it as a governmental entity to show that there is some consistency within the context of our laws in general. But also, you don't want the public to take matters into their own hands. In the place of a president, though, that has that much power, meaning, Spider-Man, with great power comes great responsibility, right? The country is trusting him with that power. And it's saying, we're going to bestow this power upon you to look out for the best interests of South Korea. And you take that and turn it against the country itself in order to hijack the country to provoke a war and potentially to send your people into a front that they have nothing to do with and that is not in their best interests. Not to mention, again, killing potentially your political opponents. The jailing of your political opponents is problematic enough. And so it requires the state to say, the president is not the state. That this goes beyond this idea of this guy being a political entity itself. It goes into what happens in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. What statement do we set of statement of principles? And statement of principles is set by his conviction. We should have did it to George Bush when George Bush pulled that shit with Iraq, and we didn't do it. And every president that came after it was fair game. So if Obama wanted to go into Syria, nothing to stop Obama from giving money to a bunch of terrorists to go rummaging through Syria to try to overthrow the government. If Trump wants to steal the oil, Trump can steal the oil. There are no consequences. If Obama wants to have these endless wars, he can do that. Like, meaning there's a philosophical, legal, and ethical principle that is built into holding, especially somebody with that much power, accountable. That should be done. And that I deeply regret that they didn't do it in the United States. If they do it to him, God bless him.
Well,
God bless him.
I believe that they certainly should have been punished. I mean, Noam Chomsky is on the record saying that every U.S. president since the end of World War II should have been hanged according to, the Nuremberg laws. I mean, this is
Right.
international law. You engage in aggressive war. That is the ultimate crime. It's the crime against peace. It's the crime that contains all the other crimes. And so all of them should have been, if we were to apply the Nuremberg standards, should have been hanged. But I'm not somebody who believes in the death penalty per se. I think there is a good argument for punishment and re-education. And I believe that that is actually more of a kind of salutary effect, if you will.
I accept that. I accept that. I'm not a big God, man. Covering this stuff is making me far more brutal than I think I would be under normal circumstances. But it's a pragmatic reaction to the environment that I guess I'm floating in. That guy was going to get a lot of people killed.
Yes.
Let's be very honest. George Bush got 1 million people killed. Do I want to re-educate George Bush? No. He had no compunction about sending Americans to die. He had no issue with having Americans kill other people in Iraq. He had no issue at all with creating, like, uncorking ISIS, going rummaging through the Middle East, killing and chopping off heads. This was a direct result of his policy and U.S. policy to reshape the Middle East with American might. Do I really want to re-educate him for all of that? No. If I'm being brutally honest with you, no. No.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Chomsky standard, is a justifiable one, but also, just a little historical footnote, not insignificant. It was Cheney and the neocons that were driving this. Bush was, the kind of front. He was the figurehead, the front man for this, but it was